I'm Anna Marie Cox. And are you one of those science fiction people?
Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner, and I'm feeling pretty alien myself today.
Explains so much, Dan. Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of...
Consociationalism.
I might have to ask about that.
Yeah, fair enough. I get why there's a reason I chose that one for today. Yeah.
All right. And attribution theory. Today we'll be talking about The Faculty, which is available at Paramount Plus. I have a Paramount Plus subscription. I'm betting you do too, Dan.
I do as well. Yes.
Why do you have one?
Because Lower Decks is out.
I have also begun the third season of Lower Decks.
Okay. The fourth season just dropped.
Oh, no, then I've started the fourth season.
Excellent.
Yes, because I binged the first 3 seasons.
Oh, good.
In the next few weeks, however, we'll be talking about Rebecca Rowan Horse's Black Sun. And then we have, speaking of Star Trek properties.
One of them, yes, at least, yes.
One of them, we are doing an episode about sci-fi musicals, of which we think there are two, at least two worth talking about. It occurs to me there might be one out there that we aren't thinking.
We should encourage our listeners, if there are other sci-fi musical, mashups, to let us know. Like the only one I can think of is maybe Flash Gordon, but that's not really a musical. That just has an awesome Queen song, as far as I can recall.
We have lots of ideas ourselves, but are always taking suggestions. The best place for people to offer suggestions, Dan.
Well, that would be our Discord channel, because both Anna and I are, active members. Anna a little more active than I, but we peruse everything that is said on the Discord.
One of us a little more active.
One of us is a little more active. One of us is a little more withholding. I'm not going to say who. Yeah. Not going to name names there. The point is, however, that the only way to get on that Discord channel, which is, by the way, a great channel full of a bunch of really interesting people, is to become a patron. So if you go to, where is it, Anna? It
is patreon.com/spacethenation.
You can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. You also get access to our monthly AUAs, early access to podcasts. And if we get to 250 patrons, we will do an episode for the patrons only about a topic chosen by the patrons. And it doesn't even have to be sci-fi. Could be about rom-coms, could be about Lifetime Movie Channel, could be about, one
We have
Lifetime
some
movie.
caveats.
We have some caveats. There is no games. We're not going to do gaming, and we are not doing 9-hour.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also, no 9-hour movies about the Holocaust. We've got our standards.
Yes.
Just saying. Yeah.
On that note, Dan.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good, Anna. It was the first week of class, so always an exciting time. I will say that I did not have every once in a while first week of school, I will have the same reaction as the students, which is, I don't want to go to school today, but I didn't have that this week. So that was good. How are you?
I'm okay. Dan, we are going to have a break in the heat here.
Oh, congratulations. Is it going to be below 100 finally? Or you're cracking?
It's going to be in the 80s.
Oh my God. That is just like,
that's the prediction.
You're going to wear a sweater, aren't you?
Probably. I remember when I was growing up here, my parents had gotten divorced, and there was a brief period where they bought me stuff.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, of course. Yeah. I've watched 80s sitcoms, very special episodes on. I know how this
very
works.
Special episodes.
Yeah.
And my dad got me this. Also, do you remember when Banana Republic was an actual safari related expedition stuff?
Yes, that was their original fashion theme, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But actually, also they had actual stuff from surplus.
I didn't know that.
But
okay. Yeah.
That was not the cool stuff. The cool stuff was the stuff that was out of Africa.
Right.
If you also remember that theme. Showing age, don't care. I remember vividly one of the things that I really wanted was the Amelia Earhart leather jacket.
Oh.
Which in my memory is as cool now as it was then.
I think
I believe it would still be cool now.
I agree. I think even if there had been a period where it wasn't cool, it is definitely going to be cool now. So yeah.
So it was a little bit cropped. It had kind of a almost double-breasted kind of zipper thing.
Right. Yeah.
And my dad got it for me.
Oh wow.
But
you never could wear it because you were in Austin?
Yeah, basically. I remember it would in the winter, I think it got into the 60s. And so I wore it, and I was just sweating.
Well, after all, that also evokes Africa. So, I mean...
Yeah, that's true. That's
a good
true.
point.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
So, although I sometimes get kind of annoyed that the weather is the thing that people talk about when, you politely ask how someone is doing,
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like at this point in our climate change era...
Yeah. You're saying it's goodbye to the jacket?
Talking about the weather is not like an idle thing.
No, it's not like... Talking about the weather is not just like making inoffensive chit-chat. It is potentially a loaded conversation these days.
Yeah. So I have now gone over the weather.
Yes.
We could probably get started with the
we could talk about why we're doing this. And to be fair, our listeners might be a little grumpy with us because we said last week that we were going to be talking about Black Sun this week. And Anna called an audible on this one because she had a fucking fantastic idea. This is a legitimately great idea, and I'm in awe. I'm actually jealous that you came up with this idea rather than I did. So, yeah.
Wow, I'm starting to get a little self-conscious. I don't think it was that great an idea.
It was a good idea.
But since Dan was having his first week back at school,
mm-hmm.
and I had, for unrelated reasons, been thinking about Josh Hartnett.
Yes.
The Faculty.
Yeah.
I suggested we do The Faculty. I unironically love this movie,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of funny because it's a very ironic and self-conscious movie.
It's extremely meta, self-aware film. Yes. Yep.
And the reason I was thinking about Josh Hartnett is that, as I spoke about in the last episode, because there was a coincidence of Stephen King overlap,
mm-hmm.
in the Stephen King universe podcast that I do, we were talking about Under the Dome. And there is a casting choice that we all were like, who should be in that role? And somebody suggested it would have been appropriate at the time, Josh Hartnett. And I was like, oh man, yeah. I had such a crush on him. And his career's been really interesting. He's done mostly really good stuff. And he doesn't do much. That's what I find fascinating about him.
You sent me a link. He's clearly enjoying not living in Hollywood, I think would be the way to put it. And, he just sort of dips in and out. I'm going to again encourage you to see Oppenheimer because he's in that. And it's sort of surprising to see him in that.
I will see it. I will see it. My hesitation actually has been, usually I like the idea of going to a cool, dark movie theater on hot days. But it's been so fucking hot. It was like 107 the other day.
Oh, so like even the movie theater just can't keep it cold is what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, no, I just can't make it to the movie theater.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
The idea of like getting out and, driving over there. And parking,
no, I understand.
And then it's just, that doesn't sound like a lot to some people, but it has become, when it gets that hot, it is the equivalent to living in Minnesota in the winter.
Actually, the thing that I would dread is not so much going there, it's going back in your car. Which has been heated up to God knows what. Like that does sound really painful.
Yeah. The idea of doing it is exhausting. So I haven't done it, but maybe when it cools off a little bit.
Okay.
Next question.
Next question is, will this podcast ruin it for you? In other words, do you need to watch this film? Do you need to watch The Faculty before you listen to this? And I think we're on the fence about this. There is a little bit that I want to say yes, because there are a few plot twists that you probably don't want to know in advance. But I will say that if you do know the plot twist, watching it is equally enjoyable because they're cluing you in about what's going to happen is the way I would put it. Would that be a safe way of describing it, Anna?
Exactly what I would say. In fact, that's what I put in the script. So,
sorry.
I don't know if you saw that.
No,
but...
I didn't actually. I'm sorry.
Anyway, yes, I think that if you haven't seen it in a long time,
you don't need to rewatch it.
You don't really need... No, I'm saying if you haven't seen it in a long time, still consider rewatching it.
Oh, right. Look this way, because you'll know the plot twist already, but you will enjoy... Again, you will enjoy the way they're laying down the plot is the way I would put it. Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, I would still suggest... I think my strong suggestion is to watch it before, even if you've already seen it some time ago, because it's enjoyable on a second watch because there are lots of clues that I did not fully take in the first time. They're not like super subtle.
No. But also not, it's a legitimate plot twist. So, it does take you by surprise. It took me by surprise. I remember when I watched it for the first time. So,
So I guess we're saying it won't ruin it for you, but you'll enjoy the podcast more and the movie is worth it.
Yeah. So go watch it.
There you go.
Okay. And welcome back.
Yeah.
Anna, what was your previous experience with this film?
Dan, these last few episodes of the podcast have had me rethinking my first marriage.
Yes.
a way like maybe, like I don't, getting divorced was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't realized how much in the horror genre specifically, he had really had some great picks. Like,
you can see why you married him, is what you're saying.
I can see why I married him. One of the reasons we got married, to be totally honest, is we had like so much pop culture in common. Like, we loved the same bands, we liked the same books, we liked the same movies, we had the same politics. Not enough for a marriage. And then my second husband, we had nothing in common. That's also not enough for a marriage, I would say.
Good to know. Okay. Yeah.
So he introduced me to Event Horizon as well.
Which I know plays an important part in your
yes.
horror
And so
canon.
I saw this. I didn't see it in the theaters, but I feel like I saw it pretty early on because it didn't feel super younger than me. Whereas right now, watching it, it feels like, oh my god, these are children that I'm watching.
Yeah, for me, Anna, I think this was just a blockbuster rental, and I remember the selling points when it came out was like, the director of Desperado and the writer of Scream, and, the cast, even at the time, was amazing. And the cast looks, in retrospect, it's just freaking amazing.
Yeah, so. Almost all of them have gone on to do amazing things.
Yeah.
One of them in particular.
Yeah, well, let you know what? Yeah. That's a good segue into the story behind the story, Anna. Let's talk about this because
it gets us into news, Dan. We're rarely in the news cycle with this podcast.
True, but you could argue between the cast, Robert Rodrigez, the director, Kevin Williamson, the screenwriter, and Miramax, the studio, this really does feel like the ultimate 1990s artifact. Yes,
it does. It does, and it is amusing / sad to see that Miramax logo and automatically think sex pest.
Which brings us to
Danny Masterson, who is only briefly in this movie, does not play any kind of significant role.
I think he has 2 scenes.
Digitally edited out, actually. Yeah. And he is in it. And just this past week, we're recording on the 10th, so over a week ago now, he was sentenced to 30 years for a rape charge.
I think 2, actually.
2, yes. 2 rape charges, and he'd had, obviously he was tried and convicted, and there had been a long string of allegations. And I think we are just saying this to acknowledge that sucks. And that also, I would say, if anyone has any really intense feelings around that kind of thing, and seeing him... Yeah. Seeing him is triggering for you. Sorry, we mentioned him, but he will not be mentioned in the rest of the podcast. No. So, Dan, let us move on.
Yes.
I guess I'm the one who needs to move on.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Until Scream was a big hit. So if you don't recognize those names, that is because they have done nothing else of note. I literally did not recognize a single title in Bruce Kimmel's IMDb. Wechter was a director for some Penn and Teller episodes, which, remember, they had a show.
I forgot that.
And he's done some reality stuff. Ew. And then Scream happened. And what I think happened is maybe had a database, maybe some assistant read it, but someone was like, wasn't there a horror movie set in a high school? And this came up. And so someone was like, hey, wasn't there a horror movie set in a high school? Get me Kevin Williamson on the phone. Let's do a rewrite. And indeed, he did a rewrite. And as you pointed out, he is recognized in the IMDb as being the screenwriter.
Right.
Yes. But he was actually brought in to doctor. I imagine there was a WGA like arbitration thing. He was supposed to direct. It was going to be his feature debut as a director. He chose not to. Instead, he did Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which you and I probably, do you remember it? I don't remember it.
So, I want to say Katie Holmes was in it, but that's about the only thing I remember. Yeah.
And it's sort of weird that this has had such durability because it wasn't a huge hit. And it's sort of weird it's had the durability that's had because it wasn't a huge hit. And it was somewhat badly reviewed. Rotten Tomatoes rating is like in the 50s.
Okay, that's weird because I think you like this film a little better than I did. But I didn't hate this film. This is there's a lot of decent things in this movie. And it's just weird that it would get that badly reviewed, I gotta say.
And if you think about the Scream knockoffs from the late 90s, I would put this up there with Scream as a rewatchable movie.
It's definitely rewatchable. I think Scream is a much better film for a variety of reasons. But
sure.
But this is not a bad film. Yes.
Like, I know, like, people love The Craft. I don't love The Craft. No one has seen Teaching Mrs. Tingle since 1999.
But someone pointed this out in the Discord. It's true. There was there's a
boom.
There was a boom, and there was another film called Disturbing Behavior, I think, with Katie Holmes, in fact.
Yeah.
Which does have a plot that is similar in some ways to this. But I honestly think this is a better film. If for no other reason, it's cast better, because in that film, you had to buy James Marsden as like a stoner, which I'm sorry is the worst casting choice possible. Just whatever.
Whereas, let's see, Josh Hartnett as like a burnout drug dealer. It works. I'm going to say one thing. This is a behind the scenes thing. Yeah. He did do his own hair.
Wow. Okay. Makes sense.
Like, the reason why it looks so goofy is he did literally cut his own hair, and it was apparently something of a controversial move. But he was like, this makes me look more like a burnout drug dealer. It was not filmed in Ohio. It was filmed in Texas, which makes sense because of Robert Rodriguez. It has some Austin scenery. It does have Austin scenery. Mm-hmm. It was filmed, like I said, partially in Austin, mostly in Lockhart, Texas. And I did the search, and the football field in particular, if you want to do some kind of weird pilgrimage.
Sure, yes. All 8 of you interested in this, listen up.
Yeah. The football field is exactly the same.
Oh, that's cool.
They built a new high school, which is good, because one of the things that I liked about the movie, but is kind of unusual, is that school looks fucking decrepit.
Oh God, no! Can I shout out to whoever did the set design for that teacher's lounge? And there's part of me that wonders, was it the actual teacher's lounge? Because that, I felt the sadness come off the screen when I was watching those scenes in shot there. Yeah. So absolutely agreed on that.
So it was apparently obviously on its last legs when this was filmed, and they have the people of Lockhart knew something was wrong.
Yep.
Unlike the people of this Ohio town who did not realize something was wrong. I am not surprised by this either. Everyone says it was a great shoot. Robert Rodriguez, I think, is somewhat well known for this, that he creates a good atmosphere for his actors. And everyone had a great time on it. Clea Duvall, who, interestingly, a lesbian playing a straight person pretending to be a lesbian.
Yes, that was interesting. Yes. It was also gone on to be a director herself, I would add.
That is true. One thing that is something that I forgot and that made me laugh out loud when I found out is there was a placement and promotion deal, Dan, with Tommy Hilfiger.
With this cast, I'm unsurprised by that. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and it's funny because you can kind of notice it, because that logo, I recognize that logo on a couple people's shirt or whatever. And I was thinking, oh man, that's such a 90s thing.
I think they dodged a bullet. If they had made this film 5 years later, it would have been Abercrombie and Fitch, and that would not have aged nearly as well.
No, that would not have been good. If anyone hasn't seen the Abercrombie and Fitch documentary, it's a good one.
Oh yeah,
Jordana Brewster, who is great, one of the many great cast members. She is also in Fast and Furious, which came out obviously many years later. But in a looking back, like class reunion, or I should say cast reunion retrospective, she said it was sort of the inverse of Fast and Furious, right? So with the Fast and the Furious, I was like, this is a small movie about cars. It's a fun summer project. Everyone's really good looking. This is going to be fun. With the Faculty, I was like, you guys, this is going to be huge. Look at all these successes around us.
Yeah.
Like, She Saw That and Scream. And it was also with Dimension, which was doing really well.
It had a good run.
We thought it was going to be massive. We all thought we were going to be these huge teen stars and not be able to walk down the street. It didn't quite work out that way. But at the same time,
I think it did work out for everyone, just not with this film, is the way.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, being on the set, it was my first time shooting a movie ever, and we were in Austin, Texas, and working with Robert Rodriguez and Salma Hayek, and Jon Stewart would test his material on us. It was so much fun. I loved working on that film.
Aww.
So. And it has been reconsidered over the years. I read a bunch of different essays that were like, this is actually good. Which we agree.
This way, it's funny that I never would have thought of this for a schlock or awe episode, because I never thought of it as schlock. I mean, it's again, it's not the greatest thing ever, but it is a solid piece of entertainment, and everyone is competent and or better, as we will talk about in a little bit.
I would say that's totally Robert Rodriguez. I think that something he's known for, in addition, I believe, to having like cool, fun sets where everyone has a good time and there's no
Drama,
blood afterwards or drama. Mm-hmm. He is an incredibly competent filmmaker.
Yeah,
like he just does the fucking job, right? Like he's done some really mainstream stuff, like the Spy Kids series,
right?
Which, as a directorial piece of art, like, I don't know, like whatever, but it's solid. And I think that's what he delivers every time. I think this is a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I'm going to point out an exception to this because I had to go watch this with my child. He did The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which is a horrible film. It is a horrible film that he made for his children, which I get, but I remember being very angry at him that I had spent that amount of money that I had to watch this film. It was that bad. But that said, I think that's an exception that proves the rule.
I was going to say, I'm going to call that exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, totally fair.
And I actually feel bad saying he's an incredibly competent director. I think he's good.
No, he's good.
He brings his skill to most of his projects.
Yeah.
And this is not just good. I think the direction on this is actually...
Yeah.
This all sounds like terrible pull quotes, right? For
we really need to have a section called Honest Terrible Full Quotes.
This is an above average film.
This is a B+ film, everyone.
This is pretty well directed.
You showed an excellent effort, Robert Rodriguez. No, it's a good...
This is all right.
I think that the thing we should really say...
You know what? Like Stan, he earned his D.
We'll get to Stan in a little bit. But the way I would put it...
It's more than a D. It's more than D. You're right. It's a BB+.
It's a BB+. And I think we're in agreement that the thing that Robert Rodriguez has a really good... He brings out the best in his cast. And this is a fantastic cast. It's probably the best cast of a movie that we've watched in quite some time. So, yeah.
You know what? Let's save this for the end. But after all we've said, part of me kind of wonders, why does it miss the A+? Because it has so many good elements.
We can talk about that. Well, let's get... You know what? We got to get to the plot. Right. But first, let's get to Chekhov's What's It. This is the thing that appears very often in the first act of the film that winds up being somewhat relevant in the third act. Anna, what do you have?
Well, Dan, there is a gun.
That's true.
But... weirdly, it's not Chekhov's gun.
No.
Like, it doesn't, it doesn't serve that function.
Yeah.
I would say Chekhov's drugs.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Chekhov's scat.
Yeah.
Scat? Does he call it scat?
I think he calls it scat. I kept looking for, like, when did he call it something, but...
Snort this shit, literally.
He should have called it Bic. I mean, come on. It's because honestly, I did like the touch that you got it in pens. Totally fair. I'm going to use Chekhov's Mary Beth dialogue because... Oh my God! Like I'd forgotten. I didn't notice this or whatever.
She tells on herself.
She tells on herself constantly, particularly in the first act. It's actually that makes the second watching of it very enjoyable because it really is laugh out loud funny in terms of the dialogue. So that's fun. Yeah. All right, let's get to the plot.
We're going to the plot. We're going to do the plot. Let's do the plot.
All right, let's start with Act 1. That's the way the high school crumbles. Welcome to Ohio's Harrington High School. It's the 1990s, which means that public schools are facing bloated athletic departments, budget cuts, and the bullying of suspected LGBTQ persons. Not like today's more enlightened world, Anna. Anywho, the abusive football coach Willis becomes possessed by some alien entity. After a jury faculty meeting breaks up, Willis attacks Principal Drake. She fights him off, only to be stabbed by drama teacher Mrs. Olson.
One thing I loved about that scene, by the way, is that it does look like it's going to be sex stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's the tension at first, and like oh God, no. Right? And then it turns out just to be a metaphor for that. So
I know. And also it was the first time it was almost like a Buffy fake out, but like this way, when Olsen stabs her, it's like, oh, okay, was not expecting that. It's a pleasant plot twist.
I also, on second watch, didn't really understand why he did that. Like, why didn't he just go directly for the ear as they...
Which gets to...
how you're supposed to deliver it.
I think gets to one of the reasons why, when we talk about why this wasn't an A+ film, there's a fair number of those sorts of things going on.
Okay.
Anyway, the next day, the high school routine seemingly settles in. The traditional social hierarchy is respected, with the head cheerleader / newspaper editor Delilah dating star quarterback Stan. Zeke Tyler is a very intelligent but apathetic drug-dealing student repeating his senior year. Stokely and Casey are in the school's untouchable cast. Southern Belle, Mary Beth Louise Hutchinson, is the newcomer. The teachers are mostly sick and beleaguered and or alcoholic, except for Coach Willis and Mrs. Olson, who seem rejuvenated.
Or drug addicts, like Salma Hayek.
Yes, exactly. Except for Coach Willis and Mrs. Olson, who seem rejuvenated and thirsty as fuck, but not in the 21st century way. I'm not saying this movie was triggering or anything, but Casey's crush on Delilah did evoke some high school memories of my own. Yeah, which does beg the question, Anna, were you the editor of your school paper and or a head cheerleader? I don't think you were a head cheerleader, but you know.
I was not a head cheerleader. Yeah. And one of the interesting sort of a sliding door moments, perhaps, of my life is me not making the cheerleading squad. I did actually try out.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So then I just doubled down on being a nerd. I was like, sliding door closed, not an option.
Nerd door open.
Nerd door open. So I was the co-editor of my high school paper with... Again, this is, to me, hilarious in retrospect, but it was kind of funny at the time. There was another girl in my class who also had red hair. Molly Confer. Hi, Molly, if you're listening. And she and I had like these weird parallel lives where we like were co-everything. Co-valedictorians.
Oh, wow.
And co
Were you friends, frenemies, just straight out enemies? Like, how did it work?
We were different enough in personality.
Okay.
That it was just weird. It was just kind of funny.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, and it also traded off in a way that I maybe, I don't know how she felt about it, but it felt fair. Like it didn't feel like I was always second.
Okay, well that's good.
It was really like co.
Yeah, okay,
you know?
That's
and
good.
We didn't do that much the same. Like I'm trying to remember, like she did almost all literary stuff and I was like on speech debate and she didn't do that. And I did drama club and she didn't do that.
Okay.
But she and I were co-editors of our high school paper, the Southeast Clarion.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, Dan, though, my junior year, I was also an editor of the paper. Please guess what I was the editor of, what section I was the editor of.
Style, I don't know.
Dan, it was sports.
You know what? I mean, you've grown up to live that part.
As hilarious then as is now. What happened was the teacher, the sponsor of the paper came to me and was like, I don't have anyone else that I really want to be a section editor.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Like the dudes that were applying to be section editors, she was kind of like, I want a good section editor. And so she kind of pitched it to me and I thought of it as an anthropological experiment. And I covered football and swimming and
nice.
I didn't have the thing which would happen in a movie, which is I fell in love with sports, but it was fun.
Or fell in love with a jock. So, that actually is the thing that would happen.
Oh yeah, that didn't happen at all. My first boyfriend was a bass player in a punk rock band. So
nice.
A little bit on brand, but I've nothing on brand most of my life. Let's go to Act 2, Dan.
All right, let's go to Act 2, a pretty bizarre series of events. Casey finds an odd creature on the football field and takes it to the science teacher, Mr. Furlong, who believes it is a new species that really likes water. Casey subsequently hides in the teacher's lounge with Delilah in the hope of finding a good story. They get more than they bargained for, witnessing Coach Willis and Mrs. Olson forcing one of the parasites into the ear of the school nurse. They also find the deceased body of another older teacher, Mrs. Brummel, who had previously scared Stan half to death in the boys' shower room, and not in a creepy way. Casey and Delilah.
Although, again, it kind of starts out in this weird, like, perhaps this is going to be...
Icky sex thing, yes.
Icky sex thing.
But it's not.
A non-consensual sex thing, but then he just, takes half of her scalp off.
She takes it off. Or, yeah, they both do. Yeah. I will say, that was the most disgusting scene. Or, like, that was actually, like... For body horror types.
That's the VFX have held up very well for that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
Not so much some of the other stuff.
True.
But that scene, yes.
Casey and Delilah flee the faculty lounge. Casey calls the police, but by the time the cops arrive, there's no evidence and a very much alive Principal Drake. By the next day, things at the school have gotten stranger. The leading students are being called into the office and afterwards seem a little bit robotic. The formerly mousy Miss Burke cusses out Zeke.
No. It's this weird undertone of non-consensual sex. It's this weird, like, this happens throughout the movie, which on rewatch and because we live in the time we live in now, like, is really apparent and makes the stuff kind of extra creepy.
Yeah.
Like, because you there's this weird sexual tension.
Well, with Zeke and Miss Burke in particular, this is the one plot line that is aged
super
poorly,
yeah,
very poorly, because Zeke is hitting on Miss Burke. And by the way, props to Famke Johnson, because the way she acts in that scene does hold up incredibly well, because she's grossed out. Like, that's disgusting.
She is, again, performances. She gets good performances.
Then she becomes like the pod person version of Miss Burke, and then there's the scene where she just screams at Zeke. And again, you're right. There's
psychosexually.
Yeah, it's a bizarre psychosexual scene. It gets worse. It's going to get worse later. But yes, that's fair. Yeah. Okay, so Casey becomes convinced that the teachers are being taken over by aliens. He tries to persuade Delilah, Stokely, and Stan by showing them the creature he found the day before. But it's not in Mr. Furlong's classroom anymore. Zeke and Marybeth overhear Casey and tease him. Mr. Furlong enters the room, and when he hears Casey's theory, he locks the doors and tries to infect all of them. Zeke uses a paper cutting blade to chop off his fingers, which now have a life of their own.
Fantastic scene.
Yes.
You have to. The paper cutting thing as machete.
Yeah. We've done, I'm going to point out, twice in a month we've had the paper cutting machine as a blade. It was in Megan as well.
Oh, that's right. They did it first.
Well, the faculty obviously did it first. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The movie we're discussing now did it first.
Anyway, Zeke injects his homemade pen drug into Furlong's eye, seemingly killing him. Anna, I did forget how meta this film was about its science fiction. Beyond the obvious shout out to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, there are multiple Robert Heinlein references, multiple film directors, even a Roland Emmerich shout out. I guess my question is, too meta, not meta enough, or just meta right?
It is strange that the meta is what feels dated.
Yeah, but like, I think it's too meta. There's just no other way to put it. And I suspect this is the thing that Williamson added to the script, by the way.
Because I remember this, because during part of it, I was in grad school. Like, during part of the late 90s pop culture obsession with meta referencing, I was doing
grad school meta, grad school is nothing but meta stuff, Anna. I mean, let's be honest.
And doing it in American Studies, where that's the whole game. So that's what seems dated. I did LOL at the reference to friend of the pod Emmerich.
Same.
I'd forgotten, because also I don't feel like he is in the same category as like everyone knows. I guess everyone knows Roland Emmerich. I guess it would work.
No, but like they mentioned, like it's weird. Like they mentioned Spielberg, and then he says Barry Sonnenfeld again, like a fair reference,
right? And I'm like, does anyone besides like people who are kind of film junkies like Barry Sonnenfeld? Oh, Men in Black was huge.
He'd done Men in Black, which is fine. And again, Roland Emmerich by this point had done Independence Day. So, but it
feels like an in joke. That's the distinction, and why we're kind of like raising an eyebrow at that, is because it doesn't feel like a reference targeted at your intended viewer.
Agreed.
It feels like a reference targeted at a certain subset of the viewers, and that's what feels weird.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it's not an Easter egg, because now we have Easter eggs.
No, it's not that. That's not it. Yeah.
The most obvious homage, and I can't believe you didn't mention it, is The Thing.
Huh.
The head.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, that's right. With Famke Johnson. Yes, that's true. I didn't. That registered when I watch it, but
And when they do the Who's Human.
Yeah.
segment?
That's correct. Yep. Fair enough. The thing I will note though about The Thing is that this is where the FX have not aged well. The scene with the head walking away, not nearly as good as Carpenter's Thing, which is just incredible. I don't know if they've ever topped that, but yeah.
And the big bug also not super scary or realistic. It just doesn't age well.
No.
I think the only reason this film holds up the degree it does, has nothing to do with the VFX. That's
no, it's the cast. Yeah, it's the cast and the plot. All right, let's get to Act 3. Just say yes to drugs. Casey collects a sample alien that's scurried away from Mr. Furlong, and the 6 students hightail it out of the school back to Zeke's place with its underground Breaking Bad set.
Why does he have rats, Dan?
That made no sense. I just want to point it out. Like, the only reason you're going to have a rat in that instance is presumably to test out stuff on the rat, but he seems way too bonded to that rat for that to be the case.
It's either an experimental subject or a best friend, and
Let me put it this
He
way.
uses it as an experimental subject, and what else would he use it on? He's not testing his drugs out.
Right. So again, to go back to your question of why isn't this an A+ movie, that's one of those things where the details are sloppy and it doesn't rise to the level of an A+. Perfectly fine, but like not A+. Anyway, Zeke runs some tests on said lab rat and concludes that the alien is a parasite that is part of
This is also another problem.
Yeah. Part of a hive mind and needs water to survive. Because Zeke's drug is mostly caffeine, a diuretic, the aliens don't like it. Zeke then points out that any of them could be an alien and insists that everyone tweak the drug to prove their bona fides. They all seemingly pass, except Delilah, who escapes after destroying most of Zeke's lab. Stokely theorizes that, like an invasion of the Body Snatchers, if they kill the queen, they can kill all the parasites. Believing the queen to be Principal Drake, they head back to the school where everyone is attending the Friday night game and infecting the other team. In the worst shot football game I have ever seen on print. Like,
okay,
we got to talk about the football game.
Should we wait to discuss that? Or let's do it.
Let's get to the football game now. That is a horribly... Okay. Whoever shot that does not understand football, but you convinced me otherwise.
So, my theory, based on being someone who went to a lot of Friday night high school football games.
Fair enough.
And walked away hating football.
Which is impressive because you love football now.
I know, like right now, like I'm going to be missing some NFL games and I'm a little bummed out. And we have like the Space the Nation Fantasy Football League, which I want to talk a little bit more about, but maybe this is the place to do it. Dan, we have divisions, of course.
Okay.
In the Fantasy Football League.
Yeah.
The division names are Adorno. That is the division I'm in.
Yeah.
Avasarala.
Oh, nice. Okay, good.
And then we have a division called Antarctica, which I can't remember. Like, there's some reason why people in the Discord associate like our podcast
with Antarctica. Maybe it's
Yeah.
Because of the John Carpenter thing or the cold sci-fi winter.
Do you know much about Antarctica?
You know, Anna, I've been to Antarctica. Have I mentioned that before? I'm not sure that I have. But I have been to Antarctica, so yes. That could be
and you know, divorced dad, you'll be very proud to know that the prize that we're playing for is the Dresdner Cup.
Oh, I am touched, actually. That's great. Aw, that's wonderful.
Okay, how do you get to this game?
Back to this football game, yeah. So go ahead.
So the realistic part is the fanaticism.
Yes,
right?
absolutely,
like,
right.
That is, people who haven't seen it before, that is completely on point.
Sure.
Like the nutty, you know, like out of body experience that people have at a high school football game in Texas. Right, on the money. What is weird is the game itself.
Yeah, the game itself makes no sense. Like, the very first play you see is the opposite team having a running play of, I'm pretty sure, at least more than 20 yards. Then he gets gang tackled, and the coach seems utterly pleased with that, which, of course, makes no sense.
The thing that leapt out at me is that I don't know if Usher is supposed to be the quarterback or not, but he does a tackle.
That's worse. He doesn't do a tackle. He clotheslines the guy. It's an obvious penalty.
That's right.
Like, obvious penalty, but they're all treating it as the greatest thing ever.
Yeah,
so,
he may not be the QB. He is taking Stan's place.
I think he was taking.
It may not be for.
I think he was taking Stan's place as captain. I don't think he was taking.
Anyway, it's just mayhem on the field, which is not true to life.
Right.
I mean,
the only thing,
football,
the one thing that
credit they do tend to play football.
The thing I will say, the thing that holds up is Robert Patrick's creepy as fuck smile the entire time this sequence is going on. Yeah. Like, and he's like high-fiving his players and so forth. It's a great performance. That's the way I put that.
What I would say is that if you're objecting to the violence, that's actually accurate.
I'm not objecting to the violence.
No, I would say that's the dream of a Texas high school football player, is to be able to clothesline.
Right.
And I think that the violence is over the top because it's a commentary. I don't think he's trying to make it look like a typical football game.
Fair enough.
I think that he's metastasizing all of the stuff that could happen and the craziness of that environment. That's my theory. Maybe that's giving him too much credit. But as a Texan, Rodriguez knows how to play the game.
Okay, you would think, but let me put it this way. Then maybe, I don't mean to second guess Rodriguez, but the way I would have shot it then would have been like the first scene, instead of having the runner gain 15 yards, have them sack the quarterback. That makes much more sense as a football play and would still have the kind of carnage that you'd want to show in that scene.
Yeah, and I may be giving it too much credit, because I think the consistent thing that we are talking about that keeps it from being a great movie is its inconsistency.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
yeah.
What we both love in movies is when a director or screenwriter or movie makers in general have a fidelity to the world that they've created,
right,
and have thought through details.
Yeah.
And this movie,
doesn't
good
have
as
that.
it is, does not have thoughtful details.
This might be the case where it's like it's a too
except for like the teacher slash. There's a few places where like the details are great.
Right, absolutely. But I think this might be a case where it's a too many cooks problem, where you have, Kevin Williamson contributing the script. That's great. And like Robert Rodriguez is clearly sort of a director for hire in this. And he does, as you say, he does a competent job, but this isn't like Desperado, or this isn't like Planet Terror or something where he cares so much that he does try to get the details right as much as possible. And I think that's where it occasionally falls apart. All right. Anyway, they get Principal Drake alone in the gym, and Zeke shoots her, but oops, she's not the queen. Suspicion turns to Coach Willis. Stan volunteers to confront him in the rain on the football field. Stan earns
I love
his
the character
dues
Stan. I love the character of Stan. I really do. Because I think it's hilarious that they do this thing, and I don't know if we made clear for people that haven't seen it, but these things need water, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the rain
Right,
thing.
yeah.
I guess we did make it clear. They need water. So that's why taking it on in the rain seems so insane.
Right.
But I love that Stan decides to give up football, which is unrealistic.
Right.
Although kind of noble,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
He wants to concentrate on his studies. And they don't make him a genius.
No, and that's fair. You're right. It was because, again,
it's awesome.
Stepping back, yes, noble but really stupid decision. Much like his decision to confront Coach Willis.
And he's not that bright,
No.
or he's not like a genius. Because like in movie logic, what would happen is he gives up his place on the team and then becomes like valedictorian.
Right, his brain
right?
suddenly
like
goes.
He turns out to have like this unknown up till then.
He starts
capacity
exercising his brain. Yeah.
But instead, it's just like he wants to be a good student, and that's
You're saying you can see why Stokely is so into him and not, in fact, the lesbian. So
yes.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Okay. Stan returns to the school and begs them to let him back in, but when Zeke refuses unless he tweaks, Stan comes out as an alien too. Anna, one thing I did find amusing about the theories about the alien hierarchy was how they defaulted to the idea that the leader had to be a queen. Like, sometimes how in other films, like it's like, oh, we're going to go to this professional, a doctor or a lawyer, and you're setting up the audience to assume that it's a man, and it's suddenly a surprise or something like that. But in this case, it's like, oh no, totally a queen. And so that was just interesting in terms of sort of default assumption to the feminine rather than masculine. I'll leave it at that.
I think that's because in the shorthand of the movies of this era, and indeed, I think going back a while, this particular style of alien, when they infect,
is like an alien queen, like from the alien films.
Queen.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they default to that, although it would have been funny for them to reference why they default to that.
Exactly. That actually would have been a point where I would have liked to have seen a little meta conversation, I think would be the way to put it.
And, the vagina dentata. Like it's like... and also, laying eggs, all that stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, I did read an essay that talked about this movie. It could have been something I wrote in grad school, because it talked about this movie as fear of the feminine, of course.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, our culture is scared of the feminine. So that's kind of not, I don't think that's necessarily brilliant analysis, but that doesn't matter.
Let's move on, he said nervously. No, yeah. But I do take your point on this. Let's go. Okay. Let's close out the plot. Act 4, Parasite Lost. Needing more of the drug for defense, Zeke and Casey sneak around the parking lot to get to Zeke's car, with Casey providing a diversion. Alien-infested Delilah and Miss Burke try to seduce them into joining the pod people. It doesn't work, and they barely make it back into the school. Meanwhile, Maribeth offers up the big reveal to Stokely. She's been the queen all along, and faked taking the drugs back in Zeke's basement. She urges Stokely to stop being such a loser and join the mob. Casey and Stokely flee to the swimming pool, where Stokely is injured and becomes infected.
The swimming pool.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they don't make it that they were dumb to do that. It's just where it happened.
The thing I did keep wondering was like, ooh, wouldn't the chlorine hurt the alien? But yeah, obviously, whatever.
Yeah.
Zeke and Casey hide in the locker room where Mary Beth reverts to her naked human form. She exposits that she came to Earth because her watery planet was drying up. She then transforms back into her alien form and knocks out Zeke. Casey takes Zeke's last drug and heads back to the gym. With the alien queen pursuing him, Casey traps her behind the retracting bleachers and stabs the drug into the queen's eye. That does the trick.
I loved that scene, and I still think that that's kind of brilliant.
What is the punchline? The one ready to jack you up?
What he says?
Yeah, he's like, guaranteed to jack you up or something. I think
the great punchline though for that scene, although I think it's sort of problematic for reasons I'll go into later, is when she's expositing about how lonely all of them are, right, and how afraid of their lives and how unsatisfying it must be to be an outsider. Mm-hmm. He says, "I'd rather be afraid."
Yeah.
And that, I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
I like that.
In the aftermath, social stations are modestly scrambled. Stan and Stokely appear intent on living out the ending to The Breakfast Club. Zeke is now on the football team and completely inappropriately flirting with Miss Burke, who is inappropriately flirting back, I'm going to add. And hero Casey is now, of course, dating Delilah. Anna, I enjoyed the film, but there is a part of me that still thinks it's kind of a cheap ripoff of Jack Finney's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is in turn a ripoff of Robert Heinlein. The thing is that I'm not entirely sure this version of the plot makes sense. I don't know why the Queen is supposed to be like befriending the school's outcasts. Why would a water-reliant species decide to land in Ohio? I have many questions, is all I'm saying on it.
As we've been saying, the major flaw of this movie, for some reason, is not Jon Stewart's acting. In a more carefully made movie, it might be.
Yeah.
But in this movie, there is a level of carelessness that, especially on second watch, is really hard to ignore.
Right.
I think on first watch, it's the kind of thing that you might not consciously pick up on.
No, it's a legitimately great plot twist in the first watch. Like I again, was not expecting it and, totally fine with it. But yeah, the second watch.
But it's some of these details that don't make sense.
Right.
That when you're in the thick of it, like when you're just watching for enjoyment, like you may not stop and it won't give you a second, won't give you a second thought. Like you'll be like, okay, like you're just going along with it because it's a fun movie. I don't think Mary Beth focusing on the out crowd is, however, one of those inconsistencies because she exposits why she took pity on them.
I guess. I mean, that's
in her monologue. She says, "The planet dries up, so I escaped and came here, and I met you, all of you, and you were different from the others. You were lost and lonely, just like me. And I thought that maybe I could give you a taste of my world." So I think that that's why she chose them, because she actually is being, in her mind, generous. Like she's offering them a gift, which is, if they had explored this just a little more, would be so interesting.
I think that's the problem. The problem is, you're right. By the logic of the exposition, that is an argument. It's just that it doesn't really gel with everything we've watched up till that point. And so, again, the film needed... I hate to say this because I think Kevin Williamson is a great screenwriter. It needed another draft, I guess. Or that's what I guess I'm saying.
So I guess what I'm saying is that particular part of the plot is actually very intriguing to me. The idea that joining this hive mind is a gift. Other movies have done the similar thing. It wouldn't be original, but it would be interesting. Yeah. And I'll just say, they really should have landed in St. Paul. Josh Hartnett's hometown.
And, it is the land of 10,000 lakes, correct? I mean, that probably would have been good.
That's right.
Fair enough.
All right, well, Dan, I have a question.
Oh, well, this is a school setting, so go ahead.
I didn't raise my hand, I'm sorry, but...
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Is there IR in this movie?
Anna, I'm the authority figure here. It's time you realize that.
That might be one of my favorite lead-ins that we have ever done, or you have ever done.
By the way, again, props to Famke Johnson, who gives that line reading so many layers. Yeah. I hereby declare that there is IR in this film. You know what drives actors in a world of anarchy, Anna? It's fear and insecurity. And you know what drives high school students in a hormone-infused setting? Well, lust, to be clear, but also fear and insecurity. And that's why the pod notion, I think, is so attractive in general. And it's, you've cited this before, but Mary Beth's pitch at the end, the compelling aspect of it is the notion of, what if we could eliminate all your fear and all your insecurity? Instead of an anarchic environment, there could be a single unitary actor with a well-defined purpose. In some ways, it's the same compelling logic the Borg make in the Star Trek shows and so on and so forth. And it's therefore little wonder that so much of the school is taken over before there's any, attempt at a counterattack of any kind whatsoever. So fair enough. And also, let's be blunt. The teachers are clearly much better off as pod people than they were before. I mean, it is striking how, and again, this is a quality aspect of the film. The ways in which all of the teachers just look utterly bedraggled prior to becoming pod people. And then when they become pod people, they're all their best versions of themselves. You know what I mean, but
they have more energy.
Yes. They're more goal directed. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But similarly, by the way, highly centralized systems are also uniquely vulnerable. With decentralized systems, attacks can take down part of the group, but not all of it. That's the whole point of decentralization. And to be fair, centralized systems are in theory impervious to attacks on the periphery. So if you're a centralized system and there's an aspect of the periphery that's taken out, that's not that big of a deal. But if you kill the central node in a centralized system, you destroy the system. Hence why this plot could occur the way it did, where once Mary Beth died. And by the way, just a shout out to those bleachers, because I've been in a high school in quite some time for valid reasons, but I will say I did flash back when I saw those wooden bleachers, the things that retract. Do they even make those anymore? I wonder if that's a recurring
feature.
They're
terrifying. That is one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I remember liking it back then too. I was like, that's a really good use of that death trap.
Exactly. Yes. I remember at the time thinking, boy, I do not want to get stuck down there. And so, yes, that was, it absolutely worked it. So that point being that is how the centralized system can be taken down.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
No problem, Anna. But you know what? This is an interactive seminar. So I have a question for you.
What is it, Dan?
Is there a critique of capitalism in this film?
Dan, it must really blow being you. Which, to be clear, is a quote from the movie. I don't know. Yeah. But it also really blows being me. Because this movie has a pretty serious critique of capitalism, and it's a real bummer. It'll bum you out. I'm quoting a little bit here from an AV Club article that I really liked that I found. The Faculty is the bleakest and most subversive film of the 90s studio teen horror cycle. I think that is correct. The first part about it that I don't think is necessarily bleak is that it's pro-drugs.
Yes, which is even in the late 90s. That's an unusual feature of of that genre at that point.
Yeah, and then I think the other part of that the AV Club at first doesn't really get into, except, well, I'll put it this way. One of the ways of looking at this movie, especially if you consider the coda, is that even being a quote unquote outsider, you are actually part of the framework. Right.
I think the coda is the bleakest part of the film, too. Actually.
I want to say more about it in a second. That even if you're a so-called outsider, right? You are still part of the framework of the system, and I would say you're part of capitalism. You may think you're a rebel, but really,
you're Ali Sheedy at the end of The Breakfast Club.
Really, and even if you play at the rebel, you're still conforming to the system that we have, right?
Yeah.
And high school is a microcosm of that. And I think actually the Tommy Hilfiger tie-in is really the best example of how this works. Obviously in the world of the movie, but kind of in our world, the burnouts and outsiders of the movie are being used to sell a product, right?
Yes.
It is. They don't just take the popular kids. It's not just Delilah that models for Hilfiger, right? It's not just Delilah and Usher. Yeah. It is everyone, the outsiders included. And that gave me a little bit of a flashback to the late 90s when this was an active discussion among all my friends is like, what does it mean to sell out? And if you sell out, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but like, what does it mean?
No.
And are you still able to critique a system if you are
part of that system?
Now, older and wiser, yes. I mean, like, it's not even
the answer to that is yes, by the way. Yes.
It didn't feel that way as, like, you know, in my late teens and early 20s, it felt like a really important question to be asking is like, is dissent, once dissent is commodified, is it still dissent? And
yeah,
I guess my feeling on that is it can be. I mean, it is neutered a bit.
Yeah.
But it's a really depressing thought. And in this case, you don't even get a good Pavement album out of it. But the thing I want to say about the coda that I had never thought about before is I think there's a reading in this film that the coda is actually proof that the aliens won.
Okay, go on. Let me hear.
And I think you could even read it as it's in the movie. Like, yes, they may have killed Mary Beth, but somehow they are aliens. They are pod people within the world of the movie. And even if they aren't pod people within the world of the movie, they become the high school equivalent of pod people.
Okay, what's your logic on this?
They went from sort of gleefully or not so gleefully, sometimes with misery, rejecting the hierarchy, or what they thought they were doing was rejecting the hierarchies of high school, to completely accepting them and in fact using them. Right? Like they're like, okay, yeah, we are. They accept Mary Beth's invitation metaphorically.
No, all of the characters, the other 5 characters are all in somewhat better, more secure stations than they were before, but nothing has actually fundamentally changed. And
they are just part of the problem now. They've gone from even like the appearance of rejecting or being cut off from to just completely participating. And if you reread Mary Beth's monologue, again, you can read it as this has been part of the plan.
Yeah.
She says, a world without anger, without fear, without attitude, where the underachiever goes home at night to parents who care. The jock can be smart, the ugly duckling beautiful, and the class wuss doesn't have to live in terror. And that's
all of those things happen.
All of those things happen.
Yeah.
So,
God, Mary Beth's dialogue really was like, you know.
Yeah. And part of me wants to believe that this is actually the deliberate read of this. And I think if I ever interview Robert Rodrigez, I'm going to ask him. I think this is a read of this that may be intentional, because otherwise Zeke joining the football team is like the thing that makes me think it's fake or somehow undermining the entire movie that's gone before.
No, for me, it's the last shot where, you know, you see Delilah and Casey, you know, saying, you know, the news media is coming over and canoodling and like, you know, has anything really changed, I think, or something like that is the last thing. And right after he says that, you see the same kids taking a different kid and about to hit him in the flagpole. And like that was Casey at the beginning of the movie. But the implication of that shot has to be, Rodriguez is too good of a filmmaker not to consciously do this. The implication is, the person has changed. The structure remains the same. Yeah. I think that's the only way you can interpret that.
And that's fucking depressing. I think it's accurate, but depressing. Again, sucks to be me. Sucks to be you. Blows. I believe, what movie has the, like, can you suck and blow at the same time? Is it possible for something to suck and blow at the same time?
Oh, yeah. Someone, I can't remember which film that is. Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds like something like from Clerks or something. But
I was going to say it sounds like it's not Breakfast Club. It might be 16 Candles.
Ooh, that could be it. Yeah, that could be
All right.
I don't know. No.
Features closing. Clank, 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 clank.
It's time for Discordant Notes. This is a segment where we take questions from our patrons on the Discord and answer them in the podcast. It's frankly been a couple of weeks since we've done this because for a variety of reasons in August, we recorded a whole bunch of things in advance. And, you know, it was sort of tough for people to stay that far ahead. But we can do it now. So Dan Brennan asks, which 90s high school would you like to attend? The one from Scream, The Craft, or The Faculty?
And my answer is Buffy off the table.
Buffy would be like, both in terms of costuming and in terms of characters, I would. Buffy is always the first.
Yeah,
But
I think I'd go with Buffy. If not Buffy, I guess body count is lowest in the craft.
I think body. Well, I think it's lowest here actually.
It is in terms if you don't think of the alien, they
exactly
come back to life. Although that actually bothered me. Like, does Mrs. Burke had her head cut off? Mrs. Burke had her head cut off.
Right, but the implication was that the alien was going to take the head and put it back on again.
Okay,
yes, it's a. But I grant you that. Let me put it this way: I will say this as a boy. I'm going to say the faculty because my memory of the craft was the boys in that film did not always. It didn't go well for them. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah,
yep.
I never really liked that movie. Maybe I should give it another chance.
We need to add that. Like, let me put it this way: I think your genius idea here is that every September, if we do a back to school thing, there's going to be more opportunities to do these sorts of films. So, maybe we'll do the craft of it.
All right.
Brian Hawkins asks, how should we rank this compared to Rodriguez's and Williamson's oeuvre?
We sort of answered this question.
Yeah, but I think I think it doesn't stack high on either of them. They've both done better work, which, by the way, is not an insult to the faculty. It's more a compliment to Rodriguez and Williamson because they've both done some really great stuff. I just don't think this quite rises to that level.
Yeah, I'm looking at Williamson's filmography, and it's not like he's done a ton of stuff that is, I mean, Scream might be the best Scream, although I've heard that the most recent one is good. But
has he done all of them?
Oh, you know what he did that I'm going to say might be underrated? This is definitely not his best, right?
Yeah, no, I think we can agree on that, yeah.
I think that what he did that might be really good is, do you remember The Following, the TV show with Kevin Bacon?
Oh, wait, was that the one about the serial killer?
Yeah.
Or like, yeah.
He did that. And that actually,
okay.
I might rewatch that because it came up. We were doing Under the Dome episode. God, a lot of things came up.
Wow, that was quite a productive episode.
It was like, I mean, like a lot of the Stephen King episodes I do, a lot of episodes for the Stephen King podcast, the episodes are like 3 hours long, so a lot came up. And I remember really liking it, although I can't remember much about it besides it was serial killer, but I remember really liking it. So, and then Rodriguez, this is like high mid.
Yeah, I would say it might actually be the median or like, a little below average for him. Which again, I enjoyed this film. It's just that like, there's other Rodriguez that like, the ones, the Sin City films I enjoyed much more and, Desperado and so forth. What
it reminds me is that there is a category of film. We love the films where someone has a message they want to tell. Like that's, I think our favorite genre of especially genre movies, right? It's our favorite category of genre movies is like when the creators like have a thing they want to tell you or they want to create, and it can go big budget, low budget, but it often makes it for at least a good bad movie, if not an actual good movie. And this movie has no passion behind it.
Yeah, and I think again it's sort of the nature of, weirdly, it's a great combination of things, but because there's no singular voice doing it, it's good. It's not great. I think that's the way you have to sort of think about it. Oh, it's raining, or like aliens or something. I don't know.
Aliens! Breaking things. I don't know. Yeah. Splat. I feel like we should have more splats in our.
We should have more splats.
Okay, Dan, what do you got?
Okay, a couple small things. Among the things that this, like, again, I think I'm in retrospect surprised by how well this film is mostly aged. I mean, the Zeke Miss Burke flirtation, no. The other thing that did not age very well, and I actually, like, I think I wasn't crazy about it when I first watched it, was one of the signs that the students are becoming pod people was the violent couple. Like, you remember, like, there was the couple that was, like, hitting each other constantly.
Yeah.
And then, like, you see one of them suddenly become passive, and then they're all lovey-dovey. And, it's a nice short storytelling shortcut, but, like, the whole idea of the couple being abusive towards each other I wasn't crazy about.
What I noticed on my rewatch is actually some interesting stuff that makes me like the movie a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Easter eggy type things.
Yeah.
There's all that, well, not even very subtle, but there's the feeling pretty alien myself today. Like, what kind of human being would I be if I did that?
Yeah.
There's lots of lines that kind of set up what's going on that are again, not super subtle, but work.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines that I have to believe is intentional,
Mm-hmm.
that I think is a reference, looked like you picked the right week to leave football, which sounds like I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue.
Sniffing glue? Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
Airplane. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's an intentional Airplane reference. So I think some of the references are kind of clever. We talked about the Emmerich one. There's a Nev Campbell reference. It is interesting to me how they stand out in a way that is dated. Like,
yeah,
we're in the Easter egg era and not in the meta reference era.
I think part of it also is it's Williamson telling on himself. Like, yeah, there's that thing where he talks about Jennifer Love Hewitt and Nev Campbell, and like, this is after I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream have come out, so I assume that's him doing that. Speaking of little in-jokes that I actually liked, or an Easter egg that I liked, did you notice how once Stan becomes an alien, and then like the next scene is Casey and Zeke deciding to go out, when you see the football players like chasing them, Stan is already back in his football uniform.
Oh. Yeah, like unrealistic, but funny.
Unrealistic, but like that was when I was like, okay, that's just funny. That was we actually don't have as much as I thought I did. I still don't get why he stabs Mrs. Drake when really all he needed to do was put an alien in her ear. So yeah. That's funny. I do have on here, is Josh Hartnett's hair supposed to be dumb? And it was. That my research showed me that actually it was supposed to be dumb. I have a few other things. First of all, again, we were talking about how Robert Rodriguez does a good job with his actors. I think the best example of this is Jon Stewart gives a credible performance in this film. He is not a good actor. Let's just be blunt about this.
And he's talked about that.
Yeah, and he's admitted that. He is fine in this film. Like, he holds his own. And also, like, I have to wonder if Jon Stewart talked him into this. Did you watch the credits scene? Like, when the credits are played, the biggest laugh line this film has for me is you see Jon Stewart where he's got one arm, like he's got an eye patch and a hook for a hand, and like trying to eat a donut or something. It almost feels like a Daily Show bit that preceded the Daily Show, but it was actually a funny ending.
Which also, but it shows the inconsistency of the movie, because other people get healed from the wounds that they
exactly it makes no sense. But that said, that was a laugh I was willing to go along. I have only two other things, Anna. Do you have anything else?
I have one something, which is okay. It's interesting that you point out the couple that stops being violent, because there is a reference at the very beginning that I think explains actually like the weird sexualness and some of what actually looks like increased violence among the students.
Right.
Phoebe Newer's character, Principal Drake, says something when she's a pod person, says something to one of the other new pod people, something about the atmosphere there screws with their neurosystem, that they are more susceptible to urges in the human body.
Interesting. So
that is a unique place of them explaining something.
Yes. They needed a little more of that, or a little done more artfully.
Right. I have one more thing.
Okay, I've got two more things. So one, I laughed at this. Delilah's disguise when she's like, it was like, was this an obvious ripoff of She's All That? Like, I'll dress like the main character and She's All That. I love the idea that her disguise was, I'm going to dress down. That was just very funny.
There were too many goatees in this movie.
It was the 90s, Anna.
I know, but
it was the 90s,
which does have.
No, that leads to my last point. Whatever you think of this film, the cast is amazing. Yeah. Like, this is just an all-star cast. Christopher McDonald, speaking of goatees, has like a bit role as, Elijah Wood's father, and like seems like he's a malevolent presence, even though he's barely on the screen. And he only has one good line. But, like the fact that he was in that role is stunning. And also just a shout out to Daniel von Bargen, who is he's the character actor who plays the sort of alcoholic teacher. And, you don't know his name. Trust me, listeners, you have seen him in some film somewhere as a cop. Like, he plays, he's like a great character actor, and just detective of some kind. Yeah. And usually not very good, frankly. Not very good detective. He's a great actor, and so like it was nice to see his name in the credits. Is my point. Like, he got up to the credit level. He wasn't just like only in the. He wasn't like in the 10th in the call sheet or anything.
Yeah, this was a fun rewatch. Let's see. We have reached the end of the talking about the movie portion of our podcast. So now I will remind people, always can use a review. If you want to give us a review, please do.
Mhm.
Dan's handing out Blue Sky invites, I think.
I suddenly got a
exchange for
whole,
good reviews.
I got like a dozen of them suddenly. It was very weird.
You just were giving away. See, Dan, you have to like ask for something. You have to say, I will give you a Blue Sky review if you I will give you a Blue Sky code if you give us a 5-star review. I'm just suggesting,
you want me? Okay,
you're not transactional enough. I can't believe
I was going to say, I will try to barter. I will try to truck barter and exchange a little more in the name of the podcast.
So that is a wonderful way to help us. And you become a patron. Obviously, if you're already a patron, then do more if you can. And tell your friends and neighbors. What else? We have Rebecca Roanhorse coming up, and
the musical episode.
And then again, if you are a patron and on the Discord, which you should be a part of because it's a really wonderful community, there is a suggestions channel. Dan, do you got any plugs?
Anna, I'm pretty happy about this. I think by the time this comes out, I will have a piece in the Yale Review about the bear and the menu.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And
I can't believe you haven't mentioned this earlier.
Because
it's unlike you to not name drop, number one, not humble brag. But
I'm pretty pleased with this because, among other things, the argument I'm going to be making in the piece is that the bear is the opposite of a critique of capitalism. It's actually a hosanna to capitalism. So I'm going to be this way, Anna. I'm actually looking forward to. I will send you the link. I really am curious about your thoughts.
Interesting too, because it is all about labor.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. I haven't watched the second season in some ways because I didn't know where it was going to go first season, the addiction and family trauma stuff.
Yeah.
So I ran with it and it was great. But there's a part of me that is like, am I up for this now?
I will tell you and I will tell our listeners, the second season is less stressful on the whole, but there are 2 episodes in it that are very stressful, particularly if family dynamics will get to you. So I don't want to like sugarcoat it, but
I mean, it's good. It's great. Yeah. And so that will probably get me there. Yeah. It just might not be, and it'll get me there. So that's cool. I also haven't seen the menu.
Oh,
maybe I should see it. It's good.
No, I don't think it is good, but you might like it. Like, I mean, it's like it. I had a very negative reaction to that film, and that's part of the reason why I decided to write this. It's interesting.
Something about it puts me off, and I can't figure out why. Also,
it's an obvious eat the rich genre film, and in being so obvious, I think not very useful.
Although I enjoyed Glass Onion.
Glass Onion, I enjoyed as well.
Knives Out.
I don't think those are fine. This is not as good, in my opinion.
Dan, also,
would you have anything coming up?
Newsletter?
I like the idea of newsletter. Yes, that's good. Yes, I have a Substack. It's a Substack. It's called Dresner's World. Newsletter. Yeah. It's called Dresner's World. It's about, international relations, American politics, American foreign policy, occasionally pop culture stuff. Anna, what about you? Do you have anything coming through in the pipeline?
I am a columnist for NBC and the New Republic. I have a big piece coming out in New Republic that hopefully is either on the stands or it's out. You know what? I had forgotten that TNR is monthly now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's why it's always the 90s in my head, and TNR is like, what else?
The in-flight magazine for Air Force One.
The in-flight magazine for Air Force One. I rewatched Shattered Glass recently. It's so good.
It really is good. I love that film too. And I was writing for TNR Online when that came out. I remember because
youngsters, if you haven't seen it, just check it out. Although it would be interesting to me if you had no idea about the context of it, if you just saw it. But I think as a movie about this incredibly minor, weirdly micro controversy, it should not be as compelling.
It should not be as compelling of a film as it actually is. Like, I'm actually amazed. That is not something I think they could have filmed, and yet it's very well done.
Hayden Christensen and
Chloe Sevigny and Peter Sarsgaard.
Yeah, Peter's skateboard. No, it's not. Not quite that name, but yeah, he is so good. He is just playing a character who I know. I know, and we both know in real life. I mean,
yeah.
who's not that? I mean, he's fine. He's perfect. He's just not the same person. Like,
yes, that would be a safe way of putting it.
What else do I do? Oh, in November, I will be doing a NaNoWriMo writing workshop or a writing gathering where you sign up and we meet at 6:00 in the morning to write for an hour, because NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. And the idea is you write between 800 and 1,000 words a day. And at the end of that, you have like a novella if you've been writing. So I've never actually produced a novella that way. I've never actually gotten to the point where I'm writing all of those days, but I will show up and I'll be there, and I give writing prompts, and we have like weekly kind of coffees to talk about stuff. It's a really great way. If you want to do NaNoWriMo, it's a really great way to kind of create accountability for yourself and a community that is going to participate along with you. And that information about that is on my website, which is, as Dan knows,
www.annamariecox.com.
Spelled the same way, just pronounced differently. Dan, you looked like you had a joke to tell, or you're going to make fun of me about something. So
you lost me when you said 6 a.m. That was the only thing.
Okay, so it's 6 to 8, and you could join at 7, and also you are East Coast time.
That's fair. Okay.
So if you wanted to join, if you wanted to do it with us, that would be kind of great. You don't have to be working on a novel. It's just a fun... I also do a writing group every month that is just not NaNoWriMo, and it's also great. It's just a little more low key. Yeah, you're not going to think about it, but
I'm going to think about it.
I appreciate.
I am very much going to think about it while I'm sleeping, but I'm going to think about it.
All right, I think we've reached the end of our pluggables. Mm-hmm. So it's time to say goodbye, and until next time,
keep this channel open for more.